soulmates, so much to talk about on this Wednesday, February 8th, including last night's State of the Union. We'll have two guests joining us to break down what Biden's speech means for us. Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. We'll also be talking a little bit later about the Department of Justice's investigation into the Memphis Police Department and the latest with the Jackson water crisis. It's the stories that impact our people.
Indeed. That's why we're going to bring you our news, our views, and our voice. Topping the news today, members of the Congressional Black Caucus made a bold yet silent statement of their own at last night's State of the Union. They wore pins with the number 1870, just like you see here, which marks the year of the first known police killing of an unarmed and free Black person in the U.S. The pins are a call for action on reforming the institution of policing that has killed thousands of Black people in the 153 years since then. And Nicordelai, I saw a lot of these buttons last night. I wish I would have saw a lot more. I think that might have had something more so to do with news coverage and maybe the cameras not, panning in or zoning in on those who wore those pins. But I did see enough, I think, for them to have made a statement last night, a bold statement last night. A
bold statement indeed. And it's just another reminder that the issue of police reform didn't just come up yesterday. It didn't just come up with the beating and death of Tyree Nichols and too many others to name. But this has been a fight for Black folks for generations. And I think that's the message that the Congressional Black Caucus wanted to make plain and clear on a night where tens of millions of Americans were tuned in to President Biden's State of the Union address. And so, this is a clear and present danger to Black folks in communities across the country. And, I think folks were looking for the president to put the full weight of his office behind a renewed push for police reform, again, that has been generations in the making. Moving along, many Black Americans who tuned into the President's State of the Union are asking themselves, how does this really impact our community?
A valid question indeed, with apparently so many answers. And here to talk a little bit about how Black America was a part of Biden's State of the Union address is Tanya Clay House, Executive VP for Campaigns and Advocacy at the Hip Hop Caucus. Tanya, welcome to our conversation this afternoon or evening, depending on where you're from. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Tanya, tell us, what are the major takeaways for Black Americans from last night's State of the Union speech?
Well, I think that it was important that we had representation, I found it particularly important that the president, he had the parents of Tyree Nichols there, which is important. It wasn't just symbolic. I think he did address the issues that are impacting our community, such as gun violence, such as policing, police brutality, the issues of voting rights, the fact that we should not have voter intimidation and suppression, issues of health care, and even issues of climate. So there were issues that were addressed. I think there's more that needs to be done. I think that it was, I applaud the president and his honesty and transparency with regard to acknowledging that he and his family have not had to have the talk with his young children, just the way that many in that chamber have not had to have the talk. And I think bringing that reality to the present, to the fore, is something that we need to continue to do, to examine, to understand that this is a continuing issue, that our criminal system is not just for Black Americans. And so I've had to have the talk already with my 13-year-old. I had to have it 3 years ago because he's tall. So that right there makes it plain and clear to him acknowledging that he knows his standing, and he's trying to represent and acknowledge that others in this country need to respect and understand what it is that we as Black Americans go through.
Yeah, and Tanya, like you, I appreciated that moment, the realness of that moment. You tapped in to a little bit about the work. So share with us, soulmates, about the work of the Hip Hop Caucus and how last night's speech kind of falls in line, or maybe not, with your efforts as far as the caucus is concerned.
Well, I think that the Hip Hop Caucus we're coming up on our 20th anniversary next year. And so we're, excited to be able to have the conversation about how it is that culture has influence and is a part of how it is that we engage in social justice reform. This year is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Mm-hmm. And we are also wanting to recognize that this is something, the hip hop genre created within the Black community has revolutionized so many different things within our community, including American politics. And so the caucus focuses on this convergence of hip hop and culture and the artistry and the creativity that we have in our Black community with social justice reform. And that's what that's what we were about. That's why we were founded. We were founded to ensure that initially that people respect our vote. That was our initial campaign, Respect My Vote. And then we continue to work on issues, particularly on climate and environmental justice, because that's killing our communities. Our communities are the ones that have the petrochemical plants in our backyard that are impacted by what we know as Cancer Alley in Ohio and West Virginia, Louisiana. We have people who are dying because of these chemicals that are in their water and are in their soil. And these are the things that I think are not necessarily always brought to the fore. And that's what we're wanting to do, and also engage our influencers and celebrities in understanding how they can use their platform to make sure that we are fighting for the liberation of the Black community.
And I appreciate the mention of the use of platforms. We know that narrative change and culture change hold hands in terms of helping to deliver policy change. Hip hop turns 50 this year. Can you talk to us about the connection between hip hop, social justice, and politics? Does the Hip Hop Caucus intend to play an outsized role in this renewed push for police reform in Congress?
Well, I appreciate that. And yes, to answer your question simply, yes, we do intend to utilize this platform of the 50th anniversary. And when I speak about it, I think people seem to think that hip hop, it's just about what's happening right now, but it's 50 years old. This was something that it's part of all of our it's our generation mm-hmm. that is impacted. Mm-hmm. And the caucus and this convergence, as I mentioned earlier, is really about highlighting how it is that, for example, hip hop has been the voice of our community in so many different ways. It has spoken about issues, for example, of mass incarceration, which it just so happens is also 50 years this year. Mm-hmm. We've had 50 years of mass incarceration where the number of people within our within jails is upwards of almost 5 million. It was much less than that 50 years ago until we started dealing with issues of sentencing and increased sentences for minor infractions. And so now we have a disproportionate number of people within the criminal justice system that are Black Americans. Issues like that, issues of gun violence and policing reform. Our president and founder, Reverend Lennox Yearwood, was in Memphis for the funeral of Mr. Nichols and was there with the family. And we're committed to continuing to work with the family as well as working with grassroots organizations in a way that we can ensure that there is requisite reform and it's not simply something that is spoken about as symbolic and then we keep going and then another one of in our community is killed. So that is something that we're going to continue to work on. We know that things were done by executive order because the George Floyd Act was not passed, but there's still so much that needs to be done. And so I would add, again, issues of voting rights, voter disenfranchisement. People cannot be full citizens if they are not enabled in the opportunity to be a part of this democracy. And that's something that we have to continue to fight for. And so, yes, we will be actively involved. We'll continue to be actively involved. There are things that are coming up within climate reform and within other platforms that we're going to be taking advantage of. In fact, we just did a basement series for the pre-Grammys in which we had artists there in our LA office having a panel speaking about these issues and then also performing. And so this is how we can use our influence, and we're going to continue to do that moving forward.
Indeed. Tanya Clay House, thank you so much for joining us today. So much to talk about, so much to address. We'll definitely have to have you back, and we definitely appreciate your efforts. And the biggest takeaway for me, hip hop is here to stay. I'm first generation, and they thought it was a fad, girl, and it is still here. We thank you so much.
It is still here.
That's right.
We are all still here.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one. Take care.
You too.
Now off to Memphis, where the mayor has announced that several agencies not connected to the Memphis Police Department will conduct their own independent reviews of the crimes against Tyre Nichols and the department. One of those agencies being the Department of Justice's Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. The Memphis Police Department's special unit will also be investigated and evaluated. A statement from the Memphis Police Department said that more discipline is in store for several other MPD officers who are under investigation for departmental policy violations. At last count, that was a total of 7 officers. And
it's good to see that this investigation continues. I don't know what good releasing more footage would do. I mean, how much worser, and I mean that worser, you know, can that beating get? We all know how it ended, unfortunately. But I'm just glad to see that this investigation continues, and I'm hoping we don't have any more Tyre Nichols cases. I mean, that is the prayer. But you know, for further reference, let's keep the same energy. If in fact, and unfortunately, we come across another case like this, let's keep the same energy and the same momentum with allowing these families and the communities and the victims in their memory to have justice, to get justice.
Yeah, and I am encouraged that the Memphis Police Department's special unit will also be evaluated. We've talked about this here on the show a number of times already, that there are these special units like the Scorpion unit that exist in police departments across the country and so I'm hoping that, you know, this evaluation can shed some light that can be instructive to how these special units operate in other departments, if they continue to operate at all. And it's also important to note that the International Association of Police Chiefs, they're also conducting a review of the Memphis Police Department. And so lots of learnings that hopefully disrupt business as usual in law enforcement across the country.
Well, Tyre Nichols' mom said she wants something good to come out of this, so maybe this is it. Keeping with some police matters here, a new police report in Louisiana reveals that the black male victim who Shreveport police fatally shot in the chest was unarmed. Now, the shooting happened last week after 43-year-old Alonzo Bagley was killed after 2 officers responded to a domestic disturbance call, but no details were given on that call. It's reported that when officers arrived, Bagley went through a bedroom onto a balcony, jumped to the ground and ran. That's when officers gave chase and opened fire. The Shreveport police officer who shot Bagley is 23-year-old Alexander Tyler, who has been placed on administrative leave. And Nicola, I think it's worth noting that Bagley was the one who actually made this 911 call and didn't offer up any details. So much more to investigate. He could have very well maybe have been the victim of the domestic violence. Maybe the police presence spooked him in some kind of way. You just don't know what the facts are. However, I think the twist is that he was the one that put in the call for 911 for help. So this case is definitely going to continue and probably continue to rise as far as notoriety in the news as people begin to learn about it. Just happened last week.
Yeah, and this is just another example of what we see far too often with law enforcement when it comes to exchanges, particularly with black and brown folks. Shoot first, ask questions later. Yes, he was on foot, but the police officer, as I remember in the story, shot him in the chest, right? And so what is it in this training? Everybody keeps talking about, oh, we need more training for police officers. Well, why don't we evaluate the training that we already have? What was it in the training that says shoot this man in the chest in these circumstances? And so, you know, I'm sure there's an investigation that's going to ensue, but you know, this isn't the first time we've seen a similar story. It's important to note that the lawyer for the Green family, that this lawyer was also a lawyer for the black motorist whose 2019 death happened in state police custody. And so, there may be some connection between some bad actors that exist in this police department and the overuse of force, dare I say the deadly force that's being used against black men in this area of Louisiana. Now, moving from Louisiana to Mississippi, the troubled water system in Jackson, Mississippi will soon get new owners. This all comes after new legislation was passed in the Senate this week. The bill would transfer ownership of Jackson's water system to a new regional public entity overseen by a 9-member board with the majority appointed by state leaders. Now, the water crisis has caused repeated outages in which many of the city's 150,000 residents have gone days, weeks without water to drink, cook, bathe, or flush toilets.
When we were discussing this upstairs, you gave a one-liner that just actually shut down the discussion. Would you like to share that with our soulmates?
Well, I mean,
today?
My initial reaction is, are we privatizing the poisoning, of the people of Jackson? It's important to note that this bill would transfer ownership of the water system to a regional public entity overseen by 9 board members, but the majority would be appointed by state leaders. And what we have seen time and time again in this developing story in Jackson, Mississippi, is that the state leaders and the local leaders aren't necessarily on the same page. A lot of that money that's flowing from the federal government to improve infrastructure across the country is flowing to state leaders, not to local leaders. And so you have state leaders in Mississippi that are deciding how money is getting doled out to different municipalities, and oftentimes shutting out black local leaders from that decision-making process. And so, yes, it's a 9-member board, but keep in mind that the state has sort of an outsized role in appointing who is on this public board.
Here's my thing, and I know we're being cued to move on, but listen, no matter how, get them the clean water that they need and continue to check up on them, because the dirty water that they've had to deal with, they're still dealing with those ramifications, much like the folks in Flint. So get them the clean water and then check up on them to see how they're doing. Let's move on here, something much lighter. The king is now the NBA's scoring king. LeBron James has now passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's longtime record for the most points ever. Take a look. What a moment, a king indeed. The LA Lakers superstar scoring his 38,388th point late in the third quarter of last night's game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. LeBron's record-breaking night is also reigniting debate on who the greatest basketball player of all time is between him and, you guessed it, Michael Jordan. To me, they're both the greatest of all time. I believe there's enough room for that title to exist for both of them. Both of them have made very similar accomplishments, different kind of accomplishments, 2 different kind of players, 2 different kind of styles, 2 different kind of generations. I think the comparison or the cross comparison, I get it, but I think in the scheme of things, it's a bit unfair. James is James, Michael is Michael.
Well, why can't they both be great?
That's my whole point.
I agree with you 1,000%. One of the things that I love so much about Michael Jordan, that I also love about LeBron James, is that their love for the game is visceral, right? You can tell that as much money as LeBron James has made playing basketball, he's not inspired to do this simply for the money. There is a love for the game that transcends the TV screen, and we love to see it. We've loved watching him make each and every one of those points, and he's still young enough where we get to continue to watch him a little while longer. And so I say we salute both Michael Jordan and LeBron James for their love of the game. Coming up, experts are grading the speech of President Biden from last night's State of the Union.
Yes, speech writer Michael Franklin joins us to break it all down for you, soulmates. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report. We'll be right back.